And happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome into Thursday Night Live from Auburn Undercover here at AU Club. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Jason Caldwell. Excited to be back with you guys this week to talk Auburn football, Auburn basketball, lots of Auburn recruiting as it was signing day this week. Signing period got open this week for the basketball team, both men's and women's basketball this week. And then obviously some football recruiting news. They got another commitment the past couple days, 2 commitments in as many days. So lots to get to tonight on TNL. We thank you so much for joining us. And Jason, we'll get into it now. And Auburn comes off their bye week for football. Of course, it seems like feels like it's been an eternity since this team has played a football game. We'll be back at it on Saturday in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Should be a bit of a breather for this team, but at the same time, under Coach Bryant Vincent, who a lot of people may know from his time at UAB, this is a much improved ULM team that's certainly not going to be a pushover on Saturday.
Yeah, no, it does. It feels like it's been a couple of months since we've seen Auburn play football, and the time change, making days short, it makes it feel even longer some days. But you look at it, and for Auburn, can you go out and execute? Can you do things you need to do on both sides of the ball? And you look at ULM, and they started off really well. They beat James Madison and kind of were rolling pretty good, but they really struggled here down the stretch and giving up a lot of rushing yards. They only averaged 129 yards passing a game, and so this is a game where you look at it from an Auburn perspective and go, what's this thing going to look like? And obviously, that starts at quarterback. I think the expectations for both of us are that we'll see Hank Brown a good bit Saturday, maybe the starter Saturday. I would lean towards him being the starter at this point. Maybe you have Peyton Thorne available in an emergency, but sure feels like Hank Brown and give him another opportunity to see what he can do in a game where you should be able, unless you go out and make a bunch of mistakes, you should be able to go out and handle business.
Yeah, I mean, Hank Brown's last start came against New Mexico. That was obviously a game that was very manageable for him. Let's kind of look back here on the timeline of Peyton Thorne's injury, because it's been a really interesting past 72 hours or so. Going all the way back to the Vanderbilt game, it was in the second half. You could see Thorne visibly bothered by getting hit. There was a one-on-one shot he maybe could have had the next play, but the throw was a little wobbly. Cut to the bye week. He doesn't practice during the bye week. Peyton Thorne did not throw during the bye week. That was something Hugh Freeze confirmed on Monday. Said, we're going to evaluate. That's what Freeze said on Monday. Going to see how the other quarterbacks do, see how he does. Then we talked to Peyton Thorne on Tuesday. We got to talk to him before practice, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm good to go. I expect to be good to go." He said, "Look, I haven't missed a game in my college career," which I didn't realize. That's a crazy stat for a sixth-year senior. Hasn't missed a game yet in his college career. He said he didn't plan on breaking that streak this Saturday. We go out to practice later that day. He's in full pads. He's with the first-team offense, and so it seemed like all systems go. Then we get to Wednesday, and on the SEC teleconference, Hugh Freeze, I'm going to pull up the exact quote. He said, quote, "He's not as far along as I'd hoped with the shoulder. He thinks he's going to be fine, but he was not ready to play Tuesday for sure." And so, Jason, you and I were talking about this week. It's a situation where if this was Texas A&M, maybe you may see Peyton Thorne at quarterback, because obviously Auburn has thought all season long he gives them the best chance to win. But I'm not sure you go out there and risk it against ULM. Maybe he is available in this game, but I'm with you. I'd be surprised if Hank Brown and some of these other young quarterbacks, Holden Garner hasn't really gotten much run this season. He's had a couple snaps here and there, and then the true freshman Walker White, people have been eager to see him. I would be surprised if you don't see one of potentially all those quarterbacks on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Peyton has been better, in kind of getting, some of that is getting the rust knocked off a little bit after you hadn't thrown in a week and a half. These are guys that are used to throwing every day, doing those things, and so I think he's been a little bit better. Still, does that open up the door to go, hey, let's roll him back out there again? Again, I still, we may see Peyton. I do think we'll see Hank Brown no matter what on Saturday as well, and so, but from Auburn perspective, you look and go, how much were you able to get in terms of the game plan, all those things, that always factors in as well. But I think trending towards Peyton being healthy enough, but we'll see if that makes a difference. You may decide, hey, let's hold off, make sure, open up the door a little bit for Hank Brown, see what he looks like now. And, you look at it, and quarterback's such an intriguing position when you start talking about the learning process involved, failure, responding to failure, all those things. You're going to have those days as a quarterback. The only time you really can figure it out again and learn, okay, see how much you've learned is by doing it again. And so I think it would be an important time, I think, for Hank Brown to get back out there. And, hey, if you can get get a lead, do some things. Do you see Holden Gardner?
Yep.
Do you see Walker White? Do you get a chance to see some guys? That's the most intriguing part of this if you can take care of business on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why Hank Brown hasn't been in. Like you said, I mean, Peyton Thorne has been good enough. I think they felt that he gives them the best opportunity to win. Actually, I don't know about good enough. Obviously, they're sitting here at 3-6, and that's what Hugh Freeze talked about during the bye week. He said, look, it's tough not to think big picture. Obviously, he was talking about quarterback, but you have to kind of have those question marks about the rest of the roster as well. What do you do here at the end of the season now that the season is starting to spiral a little bit? Your chances of making a bowl game are obviously very far off. You and I had this conversation on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. You set a dangerous precedent if you get into that too quickly and say, we just want to build for the future.
Correct.
Because then, if you do it with the starting quarterback, you got to do it with other positions. But now you're at a point where, again, a bowl game seems so far-fetched for this team. On the conversation of Walker White, Jason, I mean, that's a name Auburn fans have brought up a bunch. They want to see, you look across the country at talented true freshman quarterbacks, they want to see their number 5 quarterback recruit in the country get on the field. The problem is, as we've talked about many times, he's been on scout team all year, hasn't really had an opportunity to work within that offense, but we know that he got some chances in the bye week to have some expanded opportunities. I guess, what do you think about the opportunity and the potential for Walker White to get on the field? Because as talented as he is, at the end of the day, he still is the number 4 player in this room.
Yeah, I think you look at it and go, can you find 8 to 10 things that you feel good about? Going, hey, let's work on a few things here in the offense. They got a chance to do some of those things. They actually had a scrimmage, and so Walker got a chance to play. They got Holden Gardner some snaps as well. And you go, can you find 8 to 10 things that you feel good about? I don't think you're going, hey, let's roll Walker White out there and play him 65 snaps. I don't think that's what you're looking for. But can you find a scenario where you can go, hey, let's get a couple of series, let him go run the offense, get his feet wet a little bit. I could see that happening. Again, I think it all comes back to the first thing you got to do is go to handle business. You got to be able to build enough of a lead to where you can make some of those moves.
Yep.
I mean, DeAndre Carter's a guy that we might see earlier than that anyway. I think DeAndre Carter's a guy that you might see a little bit more of. Maybe an E.J. Harris, maybe Tyler Johnson. I think there's some guys on the offensive line that you could see a little bit more of. Defensively, we're already seeing most of these guys already.
Yeah.
Maybe more of Morris Williams. That's the one we've seen of Morris in a little bit here or there. I think you could see a little bit more of a Morris Williams. Then can you get a T.J. Lindsey, DJ Reed? Can you get those guys maybe some reps on that defensive line to kind of get them a little bit started anyway?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to strike a happy medium, I guess, of you're still trying to win football games, but realizing that there are some young guys who still need some opportunities. Also worth noting, they are now here with 3 games left, so for a lot of these guys, there aren't really a chance for them to nix their red shirt anymore.
Yeah.
For most of them, it's still preserved. You could go out there and play Walker White the last 3 games if you wanted to, and technically he would still preserve that red shirt, regardless of who plays on Saturday, Jason. Again, this is an overmatched ULM team. This is a team that Auburn should go out there and take care of business against. Obviously, we haven't, the New Mexico State game is going to linger with Auburn fans for a while. You obviously have to take every opponent seriously, but regardless of who they were playing, they had some things to work on in the bye week. It's still a team trying to win football games. You wrote a story this week that I thought was really interesting. It's a conversation you and I have had for the past couple weeks about field position and the conversations going into that of, yes, this defense has played really well, but they haven't created many turnovers. Special teams has been shaky all year. I think that's also led to some field position issues. This is an Auburn team that when you have an offense struggling like it is this season, you need to give them a little bit of help. And boy, that would be one area to just start with as a baseline in this game, having better field position.
Yeah, and I think you look and you're right. It's been a mix of everything. Offense kind of shares their load of the burden as well, and some field position issues.
Yep.
When you can't move the ball out enough and get good enough field position to punt the opponent deep, then you open up the door there. We've seen, like I said, we've seen special teams, a couple of penalties here or there, some missed field goals. You look at it and go, okay. But then defensively, that's where, as a defense, you got to get a stop, and you give up a first down or two, and all of a sudden you're punting from the 50, and now you're starting to drive at the 15-yard line or the 5 or the 1, as we've seen a bunch. And, yeah, there just haven't been many opportunities for this offense, and that's been the question. People said, hey, your offense has been good, but it hasn't led to points. Well, when you start most of your drives inside your own 35, that makes it difficult. When you start talking about, hey, you got to go 65 yards every time you touch the ball to score a touchdown, that makes it hard. And so I think there's 2 things. You look at that and going, hey, get better field position. The other thing is that they've got to find a way to create more explosive plays on offense. if you want to cover some ground and take some pressure off an offense, the way to do it is to have some chunk yardage plays, because it's much easier to avoid a mistake when it's 7 plays versus 14. And we've seen this Auburn offense go, hey, 4 or 5 plays, you go good, then you have a holding on first down, or you have a false start, or those have derailed this group. And so, yeah, it all works hand in hand. I think you look at it and can they get some better field position? I mean, you look at it, and you mentioned defensively. Defense has played really well. It's been the strength of this team to this point.
Yep.
But they've only created 8 turnovers. It's crazy to think about it. In 7 Power 5 games this year, Auburn has only started 1 possession on the other side of the 50. They had 1 at the 50. They had 1 other possession on the other side of the 50, and that was against Missouri, and they didn't score after 37. And so you look and go, more of those opportunities, those are things that help out an offense. And for this week, it's always important. But for Texas A&M, Alabama, you're going to need some of those things to go up against those 2 teams to give you some scoring opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is patient zero of these problems, of course. That's not, that is still the biggest problem right now, is their ability to consistently get on the board and score points. You mentioned explosive plays, Jason. I mean, we keep coming back to the numbers that this team had. A lot of those are inflated, I think, by a couple performances. Obviously, Alabama and New Mexico as well. There have been moments that have really buoyed the stats for this team, but obviously it hasn't necessarily shown up at all on the scoreboard. Yeah, you mentioned the turnover margin in terms of what they've gained this year. Only 8 turnovers Auburn has forced. I mean, you're down there in the territory nationally. You're 118th nationally with Akron, Kent State, Kennesaw State, Hawaii, Oregon State. Like, those are teams whose caliber of defense, I mean, they're not even close to what you're producing this season. It's still been a really good job for DJ Durkin's group this year. They've obviously done a spectacular job, really considering the circumstances, how many young guys they're playing on defense. Jason, I mean, what are a couple things that you will be looking for, maybe besides the quarterback, besides playing some extra guys, that you want to see from this Auburn team on Saturday afternoon?
I think the biggest thing for me is that in any offense, in any situation, the thing you want to do is get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. And we've seen Malcolm Simmons become more of that guy. I think you got to get Cam Coleman more involved in the offense, whether it's throwing an 8-yard pass, 10-yard pass. Got to get the ball in his hands. Keandre Lambert-Smith is one of those guys that's a playmaker as well. And obviously, a running game with Jarquez and those guys. But I think if you start talking about where you go to create explosive plays, I think Keandre Lambert-Smith is there, but I think Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons are the 2 guys that you've got to get more targets and touches for. Now, Malcolm, you look up, Malcolm wasn't a starter. He hasn't played as much football as Cam, but he's got more targets and touches than Cam does at this point. I think you got Cam early on, they were targeting 6-7 times a game. Kind of went away from that. I think now is a time where you got to go back to those things and give him an opportunity to go make some big plays. He is your most explosive down the field receiver on this team. To me, that's where it starts for me. It's like I want to see them get those guys more involved to create some explosive plays and build that towards next year. I think from a confidence standpoint, Cam needs to have one of those 9-catch, 185-yard, 2-touchdown games to go, okay, here it is. And I think that would be to me, that would be as important as anything. Obviously, you got to win the game. You do that, you're going to win the game. And so to me, I look at that, and defensively, continuing to add more pressure. That's how you do it. Now, they're going to run the football. They don't throw it a ton, and they haven't thrown it very well. Auburn's done a pretty good job of taking the run away. I think third down, you got to be able to get to the quarterback, create some negative plays, create turnovers, create some havoc, and get a sense of it, because defensively, that's the thing that's almost like blood in the water for a defense. You have to get a taste of it first to kind of know what it feels like. We're watching it right now with Ole Miss. With an Ole Miss defense, now they've done a good job of going to portals and getting some older guys, but right now they smell it and they're playing that way. I think this Auburn defense needs to take that next step and get a taste of what that feels like.
I mean, you've seen Auburn do that in a sense with some other areas of their defense that they've excelled at. I think there was a stretch a couple games in a row, lots of 3-and-outs. They're playing better on third down. Defense is a little bit more momentum based, and so I mean it's as good of a time to do it as ever against an overmatched opponent. You'd love to see, if you're Auburn, you'd love to see go out there and get some confidence. Even if Peyton Thorne isn't the quarterback, you'd love to see Hank Brown get some confidence. You'd love to see Cam Coleman, Malcolm Simmons get a little more involved, and then if you have a backup quarterback type situation, wouldn't hurt to let Jarquez Hunter carry the ball. He'll probably have some opportunities in this game. He'll probably have some opportunities for some backup running backs as well. 11:45 a.m. on Saturday, SEC Network. Auburn returns home to play UL Monroe. Before we get into some basketball, touching on some games around the league, Jason, the biggest one is in Athens, a game that has monumental implications for the SEC championship race. Number 7 Tennessee goes to play number 12 Georgia. We've seen the problems kind of come to fruition for Georgia, particularly that Carson Beck doesn't look like a number 1 overall pick type quarterback with how inconsistent he's been. On the same time, on the other side, we'll get the SEC availability report here in about 45 minutes, but Nico Iamaleava for Tennessee was in concussion protocol.
Well done.
This week.
I said well done.
Oh yeah,
you got the name out.
Practiced it this year, but he's been in concussion protocol for a lot of this week, and so I know in our picks, you and I both lean Georgia. They've still got to show up in this game because even though it's in Athens, I mean Tennessee has a fantastic defense, and Carson Beck in that offense. I mean they did not look good at all last week.
Yeah, and you look at Georgia's front is still good. But it's not as good as the fronts we've seen at Georgia the last decade. You look at the offensive line. They don't run it very well, and they don't run it very much. And we saw Ole Miss get home a bunch with them dropping back to pass. No coincidence. Pressure on the quarterback equates turnovers. And Carson Beck has turned it over a bunch. To me, if I look at anything for Georgia, I look at the difference on the line of scrimmage for them offensively and defensively, going, look, they're just not as good up front as they've been in the past. And so that's where it starts. Tennessee will run the football, and they play pretty good defense. I think this is a 20-17 type game. I don't think either one of them runs away and hides, and I believe this is a low-scoring, grinded-out game. And, can Tennessee, what do you do without your starting quarterback? I think you try to play it as close to the vest as possible and see if you can get to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, we talked about Auburn's turnover numbers on defense, trying to force more of those. You look at Georgia's turnover numbers on offense, 12 interceptions for them this season. They're down there with, again, Utah State, San Jose State, Kent State, Kennesaw State, New Mexico. Not the same kind of company, obviously, that they're used to in most other statistical categories, better than a lot of those teams. And so it's been a problem for them this year. What was it? Did he have Beck had 3 interceptions against Ole Miss,
you look at like total, turnovers lost. And you look, and obviously Auburn is down there at 18, but there's only been a handful of those in the last. Most all those were in 2 weeks, to be quite honest. Hands, you look at Georgia. Georgia's 15. I mean, Georgia has 15 turnovers. I mean, that's not normal. That's not what you think about from a veteran team that you think about as one of the best teams in the country. They have turned it over a bunch, and so their defense has probably gained a few more back than Auburn has, which has been helpful for them. But it's an intriguing game because here we are this deep into the season, and I honestly don't really know what to expect from this football game.
Right.
And that's the crazy part about college football now is like there's still a bunch of unknown and there's still a bunch of question marks for teams 10 games into a season, and that's the world we live in.
Well, at this point in the season, too, we don't know what to expect from the SEC championship race. I mean, it is so tight at the top. Texas certainly can't go lose at Arkansas.
No,
I mean that's a capable team.
Texas looks like their path may be the most clear of anybody left out there, but it's far from clean because you got at Arkansas and you play Texas A&M at the end of the year. You got a couple of games you absolutely could lose.
And then you look at speaking of Texas A&M, by the way, Auburn's opponent next weekend. They have a non-conference home game. They play New Mexico State. So no changes in the SEC standing for either of those teams. Auburn and Texas A&M probably should look like about the same teams this time next week when they face off in Jordan-Hare. Some off weeks, if you will, non-conference games. Murray State plays Kentucky. Mercer plays Alabama. A ranked game between Missouri and South Carolina. Missouri just keeps finding ways to win football games, and Oklahoma, finding ways to lose them, like what happened in Columbia. But South Carolina, Shane Beamer, I think, has done one of the better coaching jobs in the SEC this season. It comes back to that defensive front. I mean, I definitely see South Carolina winning that game because of the problem Missouri has on offense. Without your quarterback, I don't know that Missouri has much of a chance to win this game on the road. And you look at South Carolina, and you're right. It's recruiting defensive linemen and getting those guys and having difference makers up front. They're really good up front on the defense. Offensively, they just they'll run the football some, kind of grind it out, and Lenora Sellers is getting a little better.
yeah, I think South Carolina wins that one and kind of continues their little bit of a roll. And the other interesting one is, man, I'm not a believer in this LSU team very much anyway.
No.
And they just get crushed last week by Alabama. Now you got to go to Gainesville and you got to play Florida. If you look at DJ Lagway plays for Florida, then I think Florida wins this football game. And so I don't know. I think they're whole again. You're looking at two teams and go, I don't have any idea. You could tell me one team wins 45-0, and I could go, yeah, I could see that. It could be either team. I don't know which one it is. But it's an intriguing weekend with some of those games for sure.
We'll move on to basketball now. Of course, the Auburn basketball team sits here now at number 5 in the country after Wednesday night's win over Kent State. They're 3-0 here in the early part of the season. They'll be glad to just be home for a while. They're playing Kent State, and they beat Kent State, and then they play UNA on Monday. It's their only consecutive home games throughout the entire non-conference schedule. We'll talk a little bit first about last night's game and then kind of just our impressions overall. 79-56, Auburn beats Kent State. They end up covering in this game. If you just glanced at the score, you would never really know that Kent State made it pretty interesting there. The end of the first half, Auburn led by as many as 22 in the first half of that game. Looked like it was just going to be a dunk contest there in Neville Arena, that they were going to run away with it. It was similar to the Vermont game, but credit Kent State. Rob Senderoff is a really good coach. They're picked third in the MAC. A couple really good players. They went to a zone defense that I think got Auburn out of sorts for a little bit, but it sort of goes to show, Jason, all the tools that this team has to be able to just pull out of that, because in the middle of that offensive struggle, you see Janai Broome communicating with the Auburn bench, just being like, yeah, I just need the ball.
Correct.
That got him out of it. Then Todd Pettiford hits some shots, and then you're off from there. And so they've got a lot of weapons. I thought it was an impressive game for them to struggle. It's almost the games you kind of want. Struggle a little bit in certain areas, but still pull away and win by 20.
Well, you look at it, and you score 79 points. You do that on 6 of 24 shooting for 3. So that's the first thing you look at. The stat line for me last night was 23 assists, 6 turnovers.
Yeah. On 28 made baskets.
Handling the basketball, sharing the basketball. I thought they did a great job of that. And our guy, Chaney Johnson, just continues to deliver and deliver in a big way. I mean, you look at his minutes, and he is not starting, but he's a starter.
Yep.
And I think we've seen Bruce Pearl do this at times with other guys. It sure feels like, hey, just stick with what you're doing. But the difference in, if you bring Dylan Cardwell off the bench, then you're not bringing in an offensive player. Sometimes when you bring a guy off the bench, you want a guy that brings offense and excitement, some scoring punch. And I think that's what Chaney Johnson has done for this team. But aggressive rebounding, he's sharing the basketball. He had 4 assists last night. You look at 4 players with 4 assists. I mean, that's pretty incredible. All in all, yeah, it's exactly if you ask Bruce Pearl, he probably is happy as he could be, because you go back into that one and go, look, guys, I told you this, and this. Can't relax. You can't let a team back in a game. You got to finish it when you have the opportunity. All the things that your teaching points kind of showed up last night.
And at the end of the day, you still end up covering. Yeah, I mean, like you said, they shoot 25% from beyond the arc. But we asked Bruce Pearl about it after the game, and it was kind of shutting down. I mean, me personally, I asked some of the players about that zone defense that Kent State went into, and them and Bruce Pearl all just kind of not concerned about it, because they knew, in the moment, they should make shots.
Just to make shots.
And Bruce said after the game, he said, look, we make 2 or 3 more shots, we're scoring in like the high 80s. And so that's the difference, that sometimes it just comes down to a handful of possessions. At the same time, again, impressive performance by them to come out with a 23-point win over a quality, mid-150s Ken Palm type of team in Kent State. Yeah, Chaney Johnson, I mean, has been the early season storyline in terms of all 3 games. Come off the bench in all 3 games. He's Auburn's second leading scorer right now, 14 points per game. Second leading rebounder, 8 rebounds a game. Team high, 68% from the floor. When you go into effective field goal percentage, which accounts for the weight of a 3-point shot, he's best on the team. 8 of 11 from the floor is always get it done.
Yeah.
Against anybody. But I agree with you. I mean, it almost kind of reminds me. I don't remember if Chumo Kiki came off the bench his freshman year. I think he did. But Chaney's presence for this team, not only that he plays the 4 spot, almost kind of reminds me of that just kind of quiet confidence of a guy like that Chuma had, a guy who's sort of coming into his own on offense. This almost reminds me of that jump. Not that he's going to be a first-round pick.
Correct.
That Chuma took from year 1 to year 2.
And it took Chuma really to the NCAA tournament before he got hurt to be aggressive and to go, okay, I'm that guy. And then he gets hurt a couple of games later. But it took him almost the entire year. Chaney, we've seen it now. it's second year at Auburn, but he's an older guy.
Yeah,
but you look at a guy that now has said, look, I'm the guy, and Bruce, everybody that we could find, Bruce Pearl called him out time and time again, saying, okay, he needs to go be that guy on the court. He is becoming that guy on the court, and if he continues this, it is a game changer for Auburn in terms of having that type of player to go along with Janai Broome and those guards, because Chaney is an athletic. He's not a 6'10" power forward.
Right.
He's an athletic power forward with long arms, and he has instincts around the basket and has instincts to go get rebounds. And that happens a lot of times when you're 6'1" as a college freshman and you grow into it. You've had to learn how to make those plays. I mean, Dennis Rodman was a guy that was, he went to a junior college because he was 6 foot tall and he grew, but he already knew how to rebound because he had to do it as a 6'1", 6'2" guy. Chaney Johnson has some of those similar qualities where you look at it and go, man, he just understands where to be at the right time. That's a big deal.
And going back, obviously, the headliner for them so far this season, it's the highest-ranked win in the country. It is the best win in college basketball so far this year. It's going to be one of the best wins throughout the season. They beat Houston over the weekend, 74-69, shorthanded, by the way. A couple rotational pieces, of course, with everybody knowing about the plane altercation there. We'll see about those guys moving forward. They didn't play Wednesday. Ja'Kai Howard and Shaheem Hudson, they didn't play Wednesday either. But, I mean, that game was the Tahad Pettiford show. It took him until the second half of this Kent State game to score his first points in Neville Arena. But against Houston in a spot where almost a road game, Auburn had a pretty decent presence there, but you still got to go way away from home against a really, really good team. So far, so good for them against this grueling non-conference schedule. Houston was one of the games at the beginning of the year that you looked at and said, not really a big deal if you drop that one because of the difficulty of it. But we've talked about it so many times, Jason, almost how gravy those sorts of games
absolutely.
are for your resume. I thought it was big for them to grab one because now
it takes the pressure off.
It takes a little bit of pressure off when you've got Iowa State, everybody they're going to see in Maui, potentially UConn and UNC in Maui, and obviously that game at Duke. I'm not saying they just go and lose all those games because obviously they're good enough to go and win those games, but you already have a really nice notch on your belt here at the early part of the regular season, and it's a win that's going to remain one of the best wins in college basketball throughout the year. It
does, and you start talking about the potential for this team, and you start going, what's it going to look like? And you say, look, what you have kind of to start with, and you go Auburn, Iowa State, and you go, man, could be North Carolina in round 2, and then it could be UConn. The numbers of team, it could be Michigan State, but even Colorado, Memphis, Dayton's not a bad team. But Iowa State out of the gate is a difficult game.
It's a bad bracket, I think.
It is. It's a difficult game. That's an experienced team that, they're not Houston in terms of athleticism, but they'll do some similar things to you defensively.
And they're all defense. Yep.
Yes, and so you start talking about the challenges ahead. You mentioned Duke, but Ohio State has a really good win already.
Yep.
They've played very well. And then you got Purdue, who's preseason Big Ten champs, and Ohio State may be the other team to challenge them. And so, this is as difficult as it gets, but you're right. You've already got one. You go steal a couple of more of those and do what you're supposed to do in the Southeastern Conference, and then you start talking about potential number 1 seed. That's what these games do. They don't knock you down a lot in terms of seeding, but it can really bump you up in terms of seeding if you win a few of them.
And I think more so than any other sport, and then we'll move on to signing day or signing period for basketball. But baseball maybe feels this way. Really long season, softball as well. It's almost the eye test early on when you become someone that is highly ranked, is viewed as a good team. Even when, we saw it with Alabama was the example we kind of make. Even when they lost games last year, they remained up there. Now they were in SEC title contention. But if you go through this non-conference schedule, if you're Auburn and you look good, and you win, you steal a couple games here and there, it's going to be tough. Even when you get it, you earn the benefit of the doubt. Now all of a sudden, when you're in an SEC schedule and it's really hard, and you're 3-3 in the league, people will be like, "Oh well, look what they did in the non-conference slate." You stay really high in the metrics, you stay really high in the rankings, and so lots of importance. Again, we're seeing all the reasons why Bruce Pearl scheduled this non-conference slate for this team, because you get the eye test early on, and you get all these metrics, and they sort of follow you throughout the season.
They do, yeah, and it's very different, but in some ways it is a little bit similar. You start to become a Ken Palm team. And unless you tank it, it's hard to really move down a whole lot.
Right.
You're going to stay up there because your schedule is so difficult. It's going to be hard to move off those really high lines. And that's a big part of things when you start looking at postseason.
Yeah, and all those factor in. Obviously, it's a tournament selection and seeding and all that. Jason, for basketball this week, the signing period got rolling on Wednesday. It is one of the stranger signing, things that they do in sports. AKA Auburn fans, you won't know who all is in this 2025 class for Auburn for quite some time, but they were able to sign a couple guys today. First, we'll talk about Simon Walker, the 4-star guard out of Huntsville, out of the 256. A guy who's a phenomenal shooter, really just a great all-around player, has good size. He was the first commitment in this class, and I think he's a guy that they can see being a 3 or 4 year player when he gets here.
To me, when I think about him, I think about a more athletic, more advanced Lior Berman. Lior's a guy that was able to play and give you minutes. Simon Walker's a guy that I think he's a little bit bigger. Yeah. I think he's going to be a more advanced kind of guy for this team, and that's going to be important when you start talking about building, because when you look moving on to next season, you're going to have guys in every role, because you're going to sign 9-10 guys next year for next year's class. It may be 10 or 11 depending on what happens with the roster movement and if you get an extra spot or two on the basketball roster. Simon Walker's a guy that plays in a great program. Christian Schweer's a big-time coach and comes from that Mountain Brook coaching tree. So you know he's going to understand basketball. He's going to understand playing defense, and he understands the team concept. And so you think about Bruce Pearl and what he looks for in a player. I mean, Simon Walker has all those things. And so a guy that is so unselfish, though, he's not going to be a guy that you look up and go, this guy averaged 35 points a game in high school. First of all, he plays on a really good team.
Yep. He
doesn't have to do that. Second of all, that's just not his makeup. And I think he's a guy that when you start pairing team, he's a guy that jumps to the top of the list.
Yeah, I think we went 4-0 against Huntsville in football when I was in high school. Just a random note there.
The Bucks.
Caden Magwood was the other signee for Auburn, a guy that we talked about on the Monday show. He was a commitment this week, and then a signee. Obviously, Simon Walker has been committed for a long time. This is a little bit higher level of a recruit, a top 50 player in the country. Jason, when you kind of just laugh when you watch his film. It is a chaotic, high energy player. A guy that we talked about this week reminds you a little bit of what Tahad Pettiford is doing for this team, maybe a little bit bigger, really interesting guard that's going to be on this team next year.
Yeah, a little longer guy. He's a guy that can just get shots and a little bit different, but you start kind of going, who does he compare? He is, as our national guys have talked about who have seen him play a bunch, they call him a bucket getter. That's what he does. He's a bucket getter. He goes and finds shots. He makes shots. He can get to the rim and do some things as well. In terms of creating. And so when you look at him, I think a guy that's another guy, because of the turnover on this roster, you look at him as potentially sliding in as a 2-guard pretty early and playing a key role next season.
Yeah, we'll touch on some more guys for basketball, maybe to expect moving forward before we talk some football recruiting here to close out the show. Jason, as we mentioned, this signing period is going to extend onward for this team, but a few names to know. I would encourage anybody on our online listening to go and find our podcast from Tuesday morning, that would be, I guess. Yeah, Tuesday morning, to talking about all these basketball targets. Sebastian Williams-Adams is a player that is big on their board right now, Jason. He commits on Sunday, a guy that we think they've got a pretty good shot with, a guy that made a really big impression on in the fall when they had him on campus. Really athletic, maybe 3, maybe could develop into that 4 spot. And then Bryson Tiller is kind of that's the big fish on Saturday. Maybe Auburn can land him, but what we've been talking about all this time, Jason, is that when it comes to this freshman class, if you're Auburn, you're going to need 4 or 5 guys. You've got 10 seniors on the team right now. You need to load up with freshmen. If you're Auburn, you're kind of in an interesting spot where do you want to send a bunch of money at one guy and kind of throw away the opportunity, or do you want to land 3 or 4 top 100 players? Yeah. I think maybe I lean toward the latter.
It's the intriguing part of it. We've seen even the last few years, Duke, Kentucky, some of these rosters of Kansas that were so high school heavy, and you go, man, they're really talented. But when you start playing older veteran teams that are bigger, more physical, they're more experienced, and you have those struggles, and you don't make deep runs. The teams that have made deep runs have been those older veteran teams. And you look at Duke, and you look what they're doing. They've added transfers. They didn't. Now they added, the best high school player in the country, but they also added some older guys. Kentucky, Mark Pope went almost exclusively transfers and said, look, we're going to go and try to win right now, and they did. They beat Duke the other night. I think if you're Bruce Pearl, you look at it and go, look, you're going to have some of both. You have to have older older post players, those guys, it's just really hard for young guys. But you look at Sebastian Williams, the thing I like about him is his body. This guy's 225, 230. He's not the guy you look at and goes, oh, he's 6'8", but he's 195 right now in high school. This is a bigger kid. And so I think even like Jabari, you look and go, different type of guy. This is more of a mid-range post rebounder. I think not 6'8" is not undersized, but I think he's probably more of a power forward, especially in this system, but a guy that can run the court.
Yeah, a good bit of size here when you look at the targets that Auburn has in this class. Obviously, we mentioned Simon Walker has good size for a two guard. The guy who could end up being, if he comes to Auburn, could end up being the highest rated player for them in the class is Sean Abayev, somebody that we know has visited Auburn a couple times. He also at OTE, obviously Auburn's got all those connections. There's a connection obviously with Bruce Pearl as well.
From the Israel side of things.
Yes, yeah, Abayev is from Israel, and so you wonder if that will maybe pay off here in the long run for him. So long way to go. Jason, I'm going to bring in Christian here to talk about football, but while I do, talk a little bit, you wrote a story today, talk a little bit about women's basketball as well. It seems like, Johnny Harris, her recruiting has been one of the big pitches for her as part of this Auburn staff leading this program. Good job for them in 2025, and moving forward, seems like they're going to be on a better track recruiting moving into the future.
Yeah, you look at it, and it's probably the best women's class in more than a decade. When you start thinking about, I think about the class where you kind of built a team that won an SEC championship in 2010, and you start thinking about it from the women's perspective. I think this is probably as close to that one as the deep class. You signed 6 for Johnny Harris, and you look at a couple to me that stand out. Yu Ting Ding is a 6-foot guard from China, which is, that's incredible to think about, first of all. But she has played on the U18 national team in China, big guard, and they put some video out of her today, and she was really impressive. But Brandy Arad, 6-foot guard forward from Oklahoma City, is really talented. The best player is Nyla Wilson, from she was IMG Academy, but she's from Virginia. This is a 5-star prospect, a 5'9" guard, legitimate scorer, do some of those things. So they added size, physicality, and scoring punch from a basketball perspective. So, hey, hats off to Johnny Harris and that staff. They've done an incredible job of building, replenishing talent. And, Christian, that's the key. That's what we've been talking about for football for the last, 24 months. We've been talking about replenishing talent. And they added to some of that today with a really important commitment.
Yeah, you lost Dante Core earlier this week, and we said, that was a guy that Auburn wanted to keep. They liked Dante Core. He flips to Ole Miss, but we said good news is on the horizon, and we thought the good news was very quickly on the horizon with Shamar Arnaud. Obviously, that comes true today.
Yeah.
And then you still have Neem Offord out there as well, who you think Auburn's in a good spot with. But Shamar is a guy who, the thing that sticks out to me the most, my lasting memory of Shamar Arnaud will be going back to the spring where we ran into Coach Klein when we were on the road in the spring in Buford. Shamar Arnaud is a name that just kept popping up as we were going through Georgia high schools. And it was mentioned, this is a guy that has taken a huge step forward as he's continued to grow. And now at Carrollton, I think Milton previously.
Yep.
And people kept saying, you got to go see Shamar Arnaud. You got to go see him. He's different now. We get to see him for the first time in the summer for that 7-on-7 camp with his team. And we're like, yeah, this guy looks really, really good. Long, physical DB. Maybe needs to add a little bit more weight. Maybe not the fastest guy. I think he could profile as a safety, maybe eventually. But you can definitely put him out there at corner, and he can hold his own.
Yeah, I made a comparison to Carlos Rogers a little bit because of those things. Carlos was a guy. Now, Carlos ran really well, but that long body that wasn't real big when he came out of high school. He was from Augusta. You look at Shamar Arnaud, and you go, man, a talented player. The competitive fire was the thing. I think we saw him in a 7-on-7. Then we got a chance to see them play Parker, and he's making plays on a really good defense. They got other guys back there with him, and Shamar's just a guy that, again, Auburn kept the pressure on. They continued to recruit, and this is not they lost this guy, they went and got this guy scenario. They've been wanting this guy the entire time.
They would have added Arnaud, and if they could get Neem Offord with keeping Dante.
Absolutely. These are guys they wanted. It has nothing to do with the fact that they lost another guy. They've been wanting Shamar Arnaud the entire time. Neem Offord, if Neem Offord calls tonight and says, hey, I'm in, 100% they're going to take him too. And so it's a matter, again, of best player available almost when you think about it. For Auburn right now, you go, hey, almost no matter the position, if you go, hey, one of our top guys on the board wants to come, well, it's not a matter, well, we already got 4 guys at that spot, so what? You take a 5th one. And so that's where they are right now.
Sticking a corner, because I want to touch on this real quick as well. Some other good news for Auburn there. Donovan Starr, the guy who they've been fighting to keep for so long, already officially visited Alabama, officially visited Vanderbilt, I believe, last weekend. Georgia offered him and was going to get him in for an official visit this weekend. Last I was told, that official visit is off, and he's supposed to be in Auburn this weekend. That's been one of their absolute top guys the whole way. He shot up the rankings from a mid 3-star to all of a sudden nearly a top 100 player in the country with 24/7 Sports. And Auburn has fought really, really hard to keep him. Now, there's a ways to go there. I'm not saying it's over by any means, but when I wrote my story talking about the commit status of where everyone is at, I had Donovan Starr at flip watch, which is the lowest category. Now I have him closer to monitor. I think Auburn has honestly done a fantastic job, and it is trending in the right direction for Auburn to keep him in the class.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, we're seeing all these young guys that are playing right now already at corner. And you look at this class that, if you can hold on to these guys, especially if you were adding him offered, you look at this class in terms of the corner class that you'd be bringing in, and you go Donovan Starr, Blake Woodby, Shamar Arnaud, Devin Williams. If you could get Neem offered, and you go,
yes,
man, that is an extremely talented group of young corners. And then you look at Anquan Fagans and Eric Winters at safety, adding to the guys you already have, and that would be as deep and talented a secondary group as we've seen at Auburn in a long time. It'd still be really young, but that's an impressive group of guys.
And you're not even talking about what's up front.
Correct.
And what you're adding there with you've got 4 committed, 5 if you count Jared Smith off the edge. Think that you could maybe get even 2 more as well with Joseph Mbachu and Darian Smith. So that group up front is absolutely loaded. Auburn gets another guy this week as well. Touch on real quick, Eric Smith, 6'6", 190-ish wide receiver. We both think he's more of a hybrid tight end at the next level. Twin brother of Derek Smith, who flipped from Alabama to Auburn earlier this summer. Derek is definitely the more advanced football player at this stage. Eric has a lot of size, some tools there with the size, and you get him in a strength and conditioning program and see if maybe he's a hybrid tight end down the line.
Yeah, I think you look at him and Derek looks like a football player. Eric looks like a small forward. Yeah. And so you look and you go, can he become more explosive, physical, all those things that you have to do to be able to play football at this next level. But he's got things you can't teach. He can catch the football. He can run. He can do some of those things. So, I think a guy that you look at and go, what does he look like in 2 years? I think he's a guy you come in, you red shirt, get him in the weight room, training table. Can you get him to 225 in year 1? Can you get him to 235 in year 2? And then you go, all right, slide out and play a little bit of hybrid, play in the slot, do some different things. Yeah, I think that's his future.
Yeah, so got him. Some other commit news in terms of, we just talked about Donovan Starr. Deuce Knight, obviously people have been on edge, to say the least, about Deuce after he visited Ole Miss last weekend. He's expected back in Auburn this weekend, which is pretty big news, seeing as he has a playoff game on Friday night, and then it's a morning game, and it's the ULM Friday. He'll be back for this game. He'll be back for the Texas A&M game. Ole Miss is still absolutely involved. Lane Kiffin stopped by his school earlier today, tweeted a picture at George County with a mannequin with the jersey on there. But then Ole Miss is still involved. We'll see what happens. But Tom Lloyd put out a note earlier today talking about, I think it was late last night, saying people at Auburn are pretty confident. Everyone we've talked to feels the same way, that they feel like Auburn sits in a good spot to keep him. Now the thing I wrote in my mock class is Auburn will probably have to sweat it out a little bit more than they probably wished. But welcome to big boy recruiting when you have a 5-star caliber.
That's it. And like I said, it doesn't matter who you are. And I know people have talked about it. Well, if you win more games, you win more games, it might make a difference. But Alabama's in the hunt for a playoff berth and just lost their second commitment of the week.
And Deuce committed when they were 2-3.
It is. So it is. It's what it's about. You're going to have to work to the end. You're going to have to work to the end with everybody on this class. But you got a bunch of good players, and you got a bunch of talented guys. And can you continue to do what you're doing? Can you add a few here late? Obviously, the transfer portal will be something we'll discuss heavily in December. But, Christian, this is a class that is still holding together, and that's as big a part as anything right now as those guys continue to form bonds. And as long as you continue to show, hey, you're the one guy we're missing that we need to get to the next level, that's the important thing for these guys right now.
It is kind of crazy that they have top 5 class and they're sitting at 3-6. the thing I almost equate it to, or I think I said on the show recently, is it's almost like free agency in pro sports, where it's, look, with NIL now, we can pay and bring you in, and you can be the difference in getting this to a winning team. And it feels like Auburn is only a couple pieces away in certain spots, so definitely that applies. Jason, before we wrap up here, as we hit the 6:45 mark, tell everyone that's watching online, listening later, about our fantastic sponsor, AU Club, where we're at right now.
Absolutely. We're here at Auburn University Club every Thursday night, and a great night here again. Hey, they got the Christmas decor in, so come have a meal. And it's not necessarily candlelight, but it is a Christmas light. Great meal. I have specials going on all the time. It's fantastic. Great lunch. If people haven't tried the lunch, check it out. And obviously, this is a membership, so come check it out. Golf course, pool.
You can get memberships if you're not living in Auburn.
Yes, and it's a great deal for folks that are living outside of Auburn. If I'm in town, 10 or 12 weekends a year, it is absolutely worth it. So come check them out at Auburn University Club. They'll give you a tour, let you check out the place. Golf course is fantastic. They'll be hosting another NCAA regional this spring. Men's regional hosted the women last year. So this is a place where you can see potential national champion win it again, and you can come watch them in action. So come check them out, Auburn University Club. We appreciate you joining us once again. Follow us all weekend, obviously. Football this weekend at ULM at Auburn. We'll have full coverage of that. Recruiting, basketball heading into Monday night. Always keep an eye on recruiting in every sport, so check us out there. Until next time, we'll see you later.